So, 150 years ago, there was this man in Germany who basically invented a machine that, you know, completely altered the trajectory of human history.
Oh, absolutely changed everything.
Right. But the crazy part is today, almost no one knows his name. And according to a pastor on the island of Maui, that exact kind of historical amnesia is actually the underlying reason why you're probably feeling so burned out and exhausted right now.
Which is such a wild connection to make.
It really is. So welcome to the deep dive. We are looking at this profoundly layered message titled Circulation of Overflowing Grace. It was originally delivered by Pastor Yasushi Nemoto at Kahului Union Church.
Yeah, he's pulling this from the Apostle Paul's second letter to the Corinthians, specifically chapter 9, verses 8 through 15.
Exactly. And our mission today is to unpack how this, forgotten engineering breakthrough, the mechanics of a tropical rainy season, and a very specific Japanese tradition involving local sweets, how all of those things somehow converge to answer one big question.
Which is, where does our strength actually come from when our own reserves just completely run dry?
Yeah, and it's a question that feels, incredibly urgent right now.
Oh, 100%. And the way this source material approaches it is just brilliant because it completely bypasses the usual, theological cliches.
Right. It's not just saying, try harder or have more faith.
Exactly. Instead of doing that, Pastor Nemoto essentially puts human nature on a diagnostic table. He uses these vivid, seemingly unrelated historical and cultural anchors to expose a flaw in how we process our own achievements, our anxieties, and basically our entire relationship with the divine.
Yeah.
And since you are likely already familiar with the broader strokes of Paul's letters, what we're really going to do today is isolate the specific mechanisms Paul outlines, for sustaining a life of faith without just collapsing under the weight of it all.
Well, the diagnostic actually starts in a place you wouldn't typically associate with a sermon in Hawaii. We are looking at the year 1876.
Right.
In the Hesse region of Germany, there's this man named Nikolaus Otto, and he manages to achieve something that engineers have been chasing for years. He invents the world's first practical compressed-charred internal combustion engine.
Gasoline engine.
The gasoline engine, exactly.
Which is basically the dividing line between the old world and the modern one.
Oh, for sure.
The implications of that single mechanism are almost impossible to overstate.
Yeah.
Because shortly after Otto's breakthrough, another engineer, Daimler, takes Otto's foundational design and installs it into a prototype for an automobile.
Yeah, and that direct lineage is what gives birth to Mercedes-Benz and, subsequently the entire global automotive industry.
Right.
Just think about the sheer scale of that for a second. Unless you were driving a fully electric vehicle right now, your daily commute relies on the exact mechanical foundation that Nikolaus Otto conceptualized a century and a half ago.
It's everywhere.
Everywhere, from massive freight trucks to high-end sports cars to, tiny motorized scooters weaving through traffic. They are all, on a fundamental level, utilizing Otto's engine.
Yeah. And the irony that Pastor Nemoto highlights here is that a German engineer in the 1870s could never have fathomed his invention powering a vehicle driven by someone down a coastal highway on the tropical island of Maui today.
Never. Not in a million years. The reach of the invention vastly outpaced the imagination of the inventor.
But the source material quickly pivots from the marvel of the invention to the incredibly messy human fallout that followed it.
Because of course it does.
Right, because the history of technological advancement is rarely this clean, collaborative progression. It is defined by cutthroat patent wars.
Oh, yeah. People want their money and their credit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The moment Otto's engine proves viable, the arguments begin. Bitter, protracted legal battles over who thought of it first, who filed the paperwork on what exact date, and who gets to actually put their name on the ultimate design. Yeah. It really reveals this deep-seated, universal human drive to secure the credit. We are just obsessed with saying, I built this. This outcome was generated by my intellect and my labor.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because it's funny how a 150-year-old patent dispute perfectly illustrates a spiritual problem we honestly still struggle with today.
Oh, absolutely.
We look at those squabbling inventors and we think, they're being petty. But religious people do the exact same thing with the concept of God's grace.
We really do.
We desperately want to put a patent on our own goodness. We look at our lives and we say, well, I worked incredibly hard to be this disciplined, or I made the morally superior choice, or even I managed to keep my faith intact during a really tough season.
Right.
We act as if we are the solitary inventors of our own righteousness.
What's fascinating here is how effectively Paul's writings completely dismantle that illusion of the self-made believer.
He just tears it down.
He does. Pastor Nemoto zeroes in on Paul's argument that grace is the polar opposite of human invention. It is not some compound you can manufacture in a lab or like a moral garage and then file a patent for.
Right.
It is an entirely external provision. God is the one who initiates. God provides the engine.
Wow. Yeah.
The moment we start believing we generated our own spiritual standing, we have essentially stolen the patent from the original inventor.
We just claim the intellectual property of a mechanism we literally didn't build.
Exactly.
But, if we follow that logic and we accept that God installs this engine of grace within us, how is that engine actually fueled? Because an engine without fuel is just a heavy piece of metal sitting in a driveway.
It's useless.
Right. So where does the fuel come from?
Well, that brings us to the operational side of Paul's argument, which is in verses 8 through 10. Paul writes that God is able to make all grace abound, providing always having all sufficiency in everything.
Okay.
And the hinge of that entire promise rests on a single Greek word Paul uses, which is pantote.
Meaning always.
Always, but with a highly specific operational nuance.
Okay, what does that mean?
Well, Pastor Nemoto unpacks pantote by pulling in the historical account of the Israelites wandering in the wilderness. When they were starving, God provided manna. Right.
Right, the miraculous daily provision of food.
Yes, but the critical detail is the distribution method. God deliberately did not give them an entire year's supply of manna on day one.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's true.
They were given strictly what was required for that 24-hour period.
And if they tried to hoard it out of fear, it rotted.
Exactly.
Which perfectly mirrors the cadence of the Lord's Prayer, right? Give us this day our daily bread. It's not, give us a massive endowment of bread so we never have to ask you again.
Right. And to illustrate why that daily restriction is actually a form of protection, the sermon uses the metaphor of the rainy season.
I love this part.
It's so good, because a healthy agricultural cycle requires steady, incremental rain. If the sky were to suddenly open up and dump an entire year's worth of precipitation in a single afternoon,
It wouldn't water the crops.
no, it would trigger a catastrophic flood.
Oh.
It would completely destroy the very landscape it was supposed to nourish. So the rain has to be perfectly metered out over time to bring life rather than destruction.
But wait, isn't relying on a daily drizzle, incredibly anxiety-inducing?
Oh, for sure.
I just have to speak for anyone listening who operates in the real world here. If I don't have a massive stockpile of resources, I am terrified of tomorrow. It is basic human nature to want the flood.
We all want the flood.
We want the bank account stuffed with a 10-year reserve. We want to know exactly how our career is going to pan out over the next decade. The idea of waking up every single morning with an empty warehouse and having to just trust that the manna is going to show up again, that sounds like a recipe for a panic attack.
It really does. And that instinct to stockpile, that deep dread of vulnerability, is the exact psychological barrier that Pantote addresses.
Okay.
It's crucial to understand that Pastor Nemoto does not interpret Pantote as a promise of a frictionless, problem-free existence. It doesn't mean your metaphorical warehouse is suddenly immune to drought.
Right.
It means that whatever specific God-given mission is placed in front of you on any given Tuesday, the exact resources required to meet that specific challenge will arrive at the precise moment you need them. No sooner and no later.
So the restriction is actually the mercy.
Think about the psychological weight of the alternative. If God were to drop the flood on you, if you are suddenly handed every resource, every responsibility, and the full foresight of every tragedy and triumph you'll experience for the rest of your life,
Oh, I couldn't handle that.
it would crush you.
Yeah.
The human psyche is simply not load-bearing enough to carry a decade's worth of reality in a single day. So the daily rain of grace keeps you continuously tethered to the source, but it also shields you from drowning in a future you aren't yet equipped to navigate.
That reframes the anxiety completely. It moves the goalpost from, I don't have what I need to survive next year to, do I have enough grace to handle the email sitting in my inbox right now? And when that daily rain actually soaks in, it has to change how you interact with everyone else. We have the internal mechanism, but the source material pushes us toward the outward ripple effect. Like, what happens to this perfectly timed grace once it actually lands?
Well, it actually seeks circulation.
Okay.
Verses 11 through 13 shift the focus from reception to distribution. And Pastor Nemoto grounds this ancient text in a very modern local tradition on the island of Maui.
Right, the Japanese expatriates.
Yeah. During the summer months, it's incredibly common for Japanese expats living in Hawaii to travel back to Japan to visit family. And when they return to their communities in Maui, there's this deep-seated cultural expectation to bring back omiyage.
The local sweets and souvenirs.
Yes. But it goes way beyond simply buying a keychain at the airport. Omiyage is about bringing back a tangible piece of a highly valued experience.
Like sharing the joy.
Exactly. You experience this rich, beautiful culture. You taste an incredible local delicacy. And the immediate visceral reaction is to share it. You want your friends and your community back in Hawaii to experience just a fraction of the joy you just had. You share it within your immediate circle and often with people totally outside of it.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because while sharing treats from a summer trip and, fostering a tight-knit community is a lovely cultural trait, Paul isn't just giving a lecture on the benefits of neighborhood hospitality.
No, not at all.
He is pointing to a mechanism that completely subverts how human relationships normally operate.
This raises an important question. What is the actual currency of our daily interactions?
Usually it's pretty transactional.
Right. The standard human economy is relentlessly transactional. I do a favor for you, you implicitly owe me a favor down the line. I give you a gift, I expect a certain level of gratitude, or like a reciprocal gift on my birthday.
Yeah, it's an exchange.
But when believers begin circulating this daily grace, sharing their time, their resources, and their love, without a shred of transactional expectation, it shatters that economic model.
It creates a glitch in the matrix.
Yeah.
People just don't know how to categorize selfless action that doesn't demand a receipt.
And that confusion is the entire point.
Yeah.
When outsiders witness an individual or a community operating on a system of non-transactional generosity, it demands an explanation.
They're like, what is going on here?
Exactly. They look at this behavior and ask, what is fueling these people? Why are they giving up their own comfort, their own resources, without asking for anything in return?
Wow.
According to this sermon, this kind of radical service elevates human generosity into divine testimony. The act of sharing becomes the undeniable evidence that the grace they claim to receive is actually real. It acts as a signpost, pointing directly away from the generous individual and toward a living God.
But, we have to confront a harsh reality here. If this system is so elegantly designed, God provides the daily engine of grace, we use it to meet today's challenges, and we joyfully circulate the overflow to our community, why is the defining characteristic of our modern era absolute exhaustion?
It's a great question.
Right, because why are so many people, including people who actively practice their faith, totally burned out, running on fumes, and feeling entirely disconnected?
Well, the sermon addresses that breakdown head-on in verses 14 and 15.
Yeah.
The system fails when we fall victim to historical amnesia.
Back to the amnesia.
Yeah. We forget the source of the mechanism.
Yeah.
Pastor Nemoto brings the entire argument full circle by taking us back to Nikolaus Otto.
The forgotten inventor from Hesse.
Yes. Look at society today. Everyone recognizes the modern, flashy automotive brands, Toyota, Tesla, Ford. They dominate the cultural conversation. Yet the name Nikolaus Otto means absolutely nothing to the average person on the street. We utilize his foundational invention to commute to work every single day, yet we have entirely erased him from the narrative. We are mesmerized by the shiny exterior of the car, and we completely ignore the invisible engine that makes forward momentum possible.
And we do the exact same thing with our own capacity to function.
We really do.
We wake up, and instead of acknowledging God as the source of our daily endurance, our forgiveness, and, our ability to love our families, we look straight at the shiny paint job. We look at our resume. We look at our bank accounts.
We look at our social media.
Yes, we relied on the validation of our peers to get us through the day. We genuinely believe that our own willpower is what's making the car move.
And human willpower is a strictly finite resource.
Right. If we are trying to manufacture our own grace, we are basically trying to build a Tesla without an engine. It might look incredibly impressive parked in the driveway. The leather seats are perfect. The touchscreen works beautifully.
It looks great.
But the second you encounter an actual hill, like a crisis at work, a health scare, or a breakdown in a relationship, you are completely stuck. You cannot push a 2-ton vehicle up a mountain with your bare hands.
If you connect this to the bigger picture, this is the root cause of the burnout you mentioned earlier. Human-powered love runs dry the moment we get tired. the moment we lose our patience, or, the moment someone wrongs us.
Yeah.
But God-powered love is infinite because, as the text outlines, he loved and gave first. His provision is not contingent on our fluctuating emotional states or our physical energy levels. When we try to love out of our own finite reserves, we inevitably hit empty.
Which brings us to Paul's ultimate conclusion in verse 15. He strips away all the complex theology and simply writes, "Thanks be to God for his indescribable gift." It's just a complete surrender of the patent.
It really is. Faith in this context is not a moral scorecard. It is not a daily tally of how many good deeds you managed to execute or how many bad habits you avoided. Faith is the continuous, humble recognition of the infinite grace that has already been provided to you. It is the practice of constantly remembering the inventor. It is a fundamental shift from a posture of desperate, anxious accumulation to a posture of grateful reception.
So what does this all mean for the reality you're stepping back into today? Pastor Nemoto's ultimate plea is that restoring this broken dynamic isn't achieved by just trying to be a more generous person.
Right. It's not about trying harder.
Exactly. The message points to a very specific mechanism of restoration, believing in the heart and confessing with the mouth that Christ took our penalty on the cross and rose from the dead. That is the true engine of grace that makes the daily manna and the non-transactional sharing even possible.
Yeah.
It is the blueprint for living a life that actually has the capacity to overflow, rather than just constantly running on empty.
It's an open invitation to stop fighting so bitterly for the patent on your own life. You don't have to manufacture the strength for tomorrow. You only have to access the provision that is already sitting right in front of you today.
Well said. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to carry with you. We spent a lot of time on that striking metaphor of God's grace acting like a daily metered rain, perfectly calibrated so we don't wash away in a flood of overwhelm. Take a hard look at the specific anxieties you are carrying right now. What droughts in your life are actually just you desperately trying to live on tomorrow's unfallen rain today? How drastically would your physical tension drop right in this very moment if you stopped trying to stockpile the emotional bandwidth for the next decade and strictly measured your resources against the challenges of today?